Hey everyone, welcome to the Breaking Point YouTube channel. If you're liking the videos, hit that subscribe button. Now let's get to the hunting action.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Break It Down series here on the channel. It is July 21st. Jade and I are out tonight. We're doing some velvet scouting. That's going to be the main topic here today, is velvet scouting and how I use that as a tool to help myself throughout the fall. Velvet scouting is one of my favorite times of the year. It's just a fun time to go out with your buddies and hop in the truck and go driving around, and it's when big bucks are the most visible all year long, and you just get to watch the deer as they grow throughout the year, and it's a good time to see what's really around a specific area that you might be hunting. To break down velvet scouting for me personally, this is how I do it or utilize it. So for example, I moved here 3 years ago now, and I was new to the area, never been to Iowa before, was new to public land, and the first thing I did was e-scouting. Pinned all the spots on onX that I thought might be worth looking into as far as pieces of public land. And from there I broke it down even further to where the crop fields are at, possible access points, and then once you get all that mapped out on onX, like a good driving route around those pieces of public land, not just looking at the public but looking at the private around it, because it seems like that's where the deer like to be in the summertime. So the next thing I would do once you get into your vehicle and it's time to drive and you want to go check out a new piece of ground that you've never been to before is locate crops. When you're driving around, seeing what the crop fields are in the area, you got corn here, beans here, maybe there's an alfalfa field or a hay field, one of those summer destination food sources, and I'm pinning those on onX. And also while I'm driving around these pieces of public, I'm looking for new access points. You can only see so much on a map, and then when you actually go and drive, you're going to find a lot of new places that you can access that piece of land. Maybe there's a drive into the public that you never saw on a map that you can see in person. Maybe there's a pond that you can see from the road, just like a little watering hole that you never saw on the map. I think driving around when you're velvet scouting, you're not just looking for big bucks, you're also taking those things into mind as far as crops and access points. As I'm driving around through the night, checking out these different pieces of land, and I am seeing good bucks or even just a deer in general, I like to pin every single deer I see if it's a new area. Like now I'm kind of familiar with the area, I more or less go driving around just to see, you know, did this buck make it through, did he show back up, sort of deal. But if I'm new to an area, I'm marking every single deer that I see, does, fawns, bucks, where are all the big bucks at, and then kind of look at your map once you do your velvet scouting and kind of break that down. Another thing to point out when you're looking for crops and stuff, maybe the deer in a bean field right now, but you got a cornfield or an alfalfa field marked in another area, just think when those deer disappear from that bean field where they might end up like later on. Like maybe the palatable food source right now is an alfalfa field, and once that alfalfa field turns, maybe they're going to acorns, and just keeping that in mind as you're dropping your pins and stuff and kind of creating this picture. If you have time for it, I personally like to go out and drive every single night. Everyone's got a different situation, but if you have the time, it can be a very valuable resource for you. For me, once again, when I moved here, I was new to everything, and I drove every single night, checked out all the public land within an hour of me, and kind of figured out which pieces I liked, which pieces I didn't like, and I was fortunate enough to find some really good bucks. And once I found some good bucks, then I could dive deeper, maybe hang some trail cameras in those fields, you might be seeing them, and then just keep tabs on them throughout the summer to see if they like to stay in that area, or then if they're not in the area, you can figure out where they might have moved to and go from there and do a later summer scouting trip. As far as locating the deer in the summer, there's a lot of different places they might be right now, depending on your area or the time of year. Obviously beans is the most well-known one, but alfalfa fields, any sort of hay fields, I see them in CRP fields where you might think it's just a random CRP field, but if you go out there and walk around, there might be some valuable food sources underneath that CRP. For example, the field we're watching tonight, I've always been curious, like, why are the deer coming out into this field? It's just grass, it's just CRP. But then I went out there and walked around, and there's a crap ton of clover underneath that grass. There's clover all over the place. And it makes sense. This is the perfect time of year for deer to be out eating clover, which clover is a food source that's pretty much good year round. There's maybe a month out of the year in the heart of winter that they might not prefer clover over another food source, but clover is always king. So if you can find a clover field, you're planting a clover field for velvet scouting, that could be dynamite. Another way you could velvet scout in the summer is you sit over one of your food plots or one of your own food sources or a piece of land that you have permission to hunt. I love to do hanging scouts. If there's a field that I'm seeing a bunch of deer in off in the distance and I don't really know what exactly that deer is, it's a perfect opportunity for you to set aside a night and go out there, throw up a tree stand, take your time, and have an early sit. You don't have a bow in your hand, but it is just as fun to watch those deer be over that food source. Just make sure you're keeping everything clean because you don't want to booger the deer when you're not even hunting them. To add on to that, the deer I killed in 2023, I actually spotted him during a hanging scout. There was this bean field that I came across one night. I really liked the way the piece of public looked. I was like a mile off this field. I could just tell there was a crap load of deer in there. I figured there's probably a good buck in there, but the next night, Charlie and I went in there and did hanging scout, we sat up on a tree over this bean field, and we saw a ton of deer. We saw a couple really nice bucks, and then all of a sudden, like last 30 minutes of light, we had a freaking giant, the buck I killed, come out, and he walked 40 yards underneath of us. He came out of a marshy bottom and fed in the beans right underneath us, and I was able from there on to keep tabs on him all year and eventually get him harvested. To break down that specific deer and that specific encounter and how I went about it throughout the year. So we saw him on July 4th, and then after I saw him, I went and obviously hung a ton of cameras up on that field, and I was able to keep tabs on him throughout that summer. Got a few pictures of him as that year went on, and then also was very fortunate that he stayed in that area. Most of the times the bucks relocate come September, but this buck, he did not. He stayed right on that piece of public ground. I was able to track him all year from seeing him in the summer, or I would have never known, if I didn't go do that hanging scout, I would have never known that buck was there. And that just shows you, in my style of hunting, how important scouting is, especially velvet scouting and locating those deer. As far as how I drive or what I do when I'm going velvet scouting, it's kind of different on the particular area. The area that we are in, for example, right now, is an area that I like to stay in the truck for the most part. The only reason I would get out is if there was a big buck and I wanted to get some footage of him or maybe learn something about him. Otherwise, an area where there's a lot of different little hidden fields, I like to stay in the vehicle, use my binos, glass. I like to drive slow, and if I do see a big one out in the field and I want to get a better look at them, I'll just keep driving by, pull off to the side of the road where I'm hidden, and then get out of the truck and sneak up to the field that way. Because most deer in most areas, they're used to that even, like scouting pressure. Someone driving by and stopping in their truck, more times than not, that deer will take off. Even though it's the summer, they're not that dumb. So I do think it is important to not educate that deer and take your time, go by him, and then sneak back up to that field and get some good footage of him that way, or get a good look at him that way. One other thing to not overlook is a waterway, for example. As we were driving to this spot tonight, we checked out a few other places, and I was telling Jaden, like, there's a waterway up here. I've never drove by it and not seen a big buck, and that remained the case. Like every time I drive by that waterway, there's always a big buck standing in it. They stay cool in that waterway, and they're staying hidden. When you're driving around earlier in the nighttime, a good spot to focus on when it comes to any particular field is the west edge of that field, because the west edge of all the fields is going to be the first to shade, and that's where those deer are going to come out first, where they're not hot, where they're staying cool in the shade, and they can browse on whatever food source is there, and they can stay out of the heat. We're in Iowa in the heat of the summer. It's getting in the 90s every day. The last thing those deer want to do is come out and feed in the sunlight and overheat their body when they don't have to. I like to keep that in mind too when I am going out to that food source and throwing up a camera. I'm usually throwing my cameras on inside corners or a side of the field that's the west side of the field where it's first to shade. And you don't always have to do a hanging scout over that bean field. You can grab a tripod, your binos, and go sit on the edge of a field too. Just make sure you bring some mosquito spray in the middle of the summer. They're starting to get bad here, but just tuck yourself in, make sure you're paying attention to the wind, because the deer are still smart in the summer. Play your wind right. You have a fun night watching a field full of deer come out. Appreciate you guys listening to some of my velvet scouting tips. If you guys got any tips yourself, throw them in the comments. I would love to hear it. I'm always trying to learn, listen to podcasts and different ways people like to scout in the summertime, especially velvet scouting. I feel like it's not something every hunter does, but I feel like it's something every hunter should utilize, because it is a great tool and a great way to get yourself jump started for the fall. Thanks for watching this week's Break It Down. We'll catch you on the next one.